Hello, thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast. I'm your host, Paul. Today is Sunday, September 28th, 2025. This is episode 71. And I want to thank all the support we've been getting, as usual. You can reach us at recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. That's plural, recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. You can also find us we have a private Facebook page. It's 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings Podcast. Get on there and send us a request. We'd love to have you join us on there. We always give updates and just different stuff. All the new episodes go on there. Let's see, a lot of cool stuff coming up over the next couple weeks. Let's see, this Tuesday we have Don L., which is September 30th. Don L. from Bellingham, Washington. We're going to do an episode calling it Our Real Purpose. Then the following Sunday, and 1 week from the day, we have Kat V. from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania coming on, and we're doing a show we're calling We Had to Stop Doubting the Power of God. Can't wait for that. That's going to be fun. Also, next week on Tuesday, we have Tom Yu from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Justin H. from Chattanooga, Tennessee are going to be joining us, and we're doing an episode on 10 and 11, steps 10 and 11, and we're calling it Entered the World of the Spirit. So a lot of cool stuff coming up over the next week or two. And then tonight, both of our guests tonight have been on the show at separate points at different times, and we have decided to join the three of us for this series that we're doing. And over the last few months, we've had several tradition series, but it's generally been traditions and how you apply them to your family life, or traditions in all our affairs. And This series that we're doing is actually more like based on Alcoholics Anonymous, how the traditions are applied in the group setting. And so tonight we're going to do Tradition 2, our group conscious. And we have Jerry P. from Palouse, Washington. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good, Paul. Nice to be here.
Yeah, appreciate you, buddy. And then Stephen T. from Nashville, Tennessee. How's it going, Steve?
Very well. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. And for the listeners, Jerry and Stephen both have a bit of a background with each other, right? So you want to start with that, Jerry?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Back Stephen was going to school at Washington State, and I was going to school at Washington State and working in Pullman. And so we met in some meetings and became friends.
What year was that?
I'm going to say about 1992, Stephen.
Wow.
Yeah, we met in 90, and
Okay.
Between 90 and 98.
Nice. Yeah. Jerry, you there?
Yeah, between 90 and 98, we did a lot of service together, actually,
Nice.
and had the same sponsor.
Mm. Wow, nice. And so what part of Washington was that? Palouse?
I was in Eastern Washington and Pullman, Washington,
Oh, Palm. Okay.
where Washington State University is located.
Nice, cool. So y'all got to do a lot of service together for several. What'd you say, 8-9 years? Huh? Same sponsor.
Correct. A lot of corrections work, particularly.
Yeah, and both of y'all. Let's see, Jerry. What's your sobriety date again?
It's August 6th, 1986.
Okay, August 6th, 86. And then Steve, about yours?
June 14th, 1985.
June 14th, 1985. Wow. Nice, guys. Cool. So y'all got to know each other through sponsorship, huh? So I know I've heard a lot. So for the listeners, me and Steven have met because we were home group members together, and got to know each other quite a bit through that. And I'd always heard almost every time me and Steve talked, he'd always talk about his sponsor Sam, and I always realized Sam had a huge role in your recovery, Steve. And you want to talk about Sam for a minute?
What I can tell you is I had about 5 years sober when I met Sam in 1990. And I had been a product of like the Joe and Charlie Big Book study and thought I knew a lot of stuff. And Sam really brought me down to earth and helped me to really get I think, if I can say this, a more well-rounded program, all 12 steps. Took me through the Big Book in a way that I could work with others and they could work with others, and had some real reproducibility to it, and helped me to, I think, become a more well-rounded member. Part of sponsorship was that you had to get a service position and meet up and go through the book and have a home group and go to the business meeting.
Nice.
And it was this kind of thing where a lot of us were sponsored the same way. And so we had a lot of the same message, which made carrying the message a whole lot of fun. It really did. Jerry can speak for himself, of course. What I wanted to say about Jerry is Jerry's one of these people who got a hold of the program and kind of put some pressure on me, because he was like a lot of other people that were getting better faster than me. And it was really kind of a bummer. But anyway, what happened over time is Jerry became somebody I could really talk to. And so I just want to say this is such a privilege. And he's been a good friend for a long time. I think a lifelong friend is what I would call it. And we also a very memorable 12-step call once upon a time. Maybe we'll talk about that someday. But anyhow, a lot of commonalities and just a love for AA that came out of it. So that's all I'll say.
Nice. Jerry, you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, service. We were both brought up through service is one of the requirements. Sam told me, if you want me to sponsor you, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to get a home group, and you're going to get a service position in that home group. And that helped me so much, because I really grew up both kind of spiritually and functionality of service through these various, starting with coffee maker. And Sam was very much into corrections work, so I became a part of that. And the wonderful thing is, at some point, Stephen can tell you the story about some of his cars, but we would make a fairly long drive to a facility institution. And the best part about service sometimes is the ride to and the ride back. It's just a wonderful way to spend time with other members in service like that.
Nice. Are you currently going to any corrections facilities or have any kind of service commitment right now, Jerry? I know, Steve, you do corrections though.
Yeah, I'm no longer able to go into a correctional facility. So I'm doing I'm the archivist for my home group.
Nice. Very cool. Well, cool, guys. I'm super excited about this. For the listeners, what we're doing is the schedule, unless something happens, life happens, we're scheduled for every other week. We're going to be going through a traditional every time we meet up. So tonight we're doing tradition 2. And unless there's something else, Jerry, you wanted to start with, you want to start by reading that informed, or let's start with the short and long form of tradition 2 first, and then you can go into that to the informed group conscious part. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I will read the short form.
Okay.
Which is actually longer than the long form. And it says, for our group purpose, there is one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern.
Okay. Steve, you got the long form with you?
Yeah, I believe the long form is for a group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience.
Yeah. Jerry, you want to go into this?
In general talk on the
Well, just
on
the
the
fact,
tradition.
well, just the fact that for the listeners, if you're not aware, that the short form is actually longer than the long form on this tradition area, which is funny.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Leave it to us, right? Leave it to a bunch of alcoholics.
That's right. You got to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead and read that in form, because there's a lot packed into that. So I believe what Jerry's about to read is out of the for the listeners. There's a couple. Let me start with this. There's a couple great pamphlets that I highly encourage to go check out. One of them is the 12 Traditions Illustrated pamphlet. And then the other one is, I believe, is where Jerry's about to read this next part, which it's the AA group pamphlet, and there's a section in there that says, and it's called an AA, it's an informed group conscience, and you go ahead with that, Jerry.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the AA group. I think that it's like Where It All Begins, I think, is the full title.
Yeah.
Is just a great pamphlet. It's loaded with all sorts of information, the structure of AA and home groups and whatnot. So we have this idea of a group conscience, the spiritual entity of a group conscience. And but what does that really look like? Well, a huge part of this is having an informed group conscience. And I'm just going to, and this is what it has under what is an informed AA group conscience. I'm just going to read it. The group conscience is a collective conscious of the group membership and thus represents substantial unanimity on an issue before definitive action is taken. This is achieved by the group members through the sharing of full information, individual points of view, and the practice of AA principles. To be fully informed requires a willingness to listen to minority opinions with an open mind. On sensitive issues, the group works slowly, discouraging formal motions until a clear sense of its collective view emerges. Placing principles before personalities, the membership is wary of dominant opinions. Its voice is heard when a well-informed group arrives at a decision. The result rests on more than a yes or no count.
Nice.
Precisely because it is the spiritual expression of the group conscience. The term informed group conscience implies that pertinent information has been studied and all views have been heard before the group votes.
Nice. That's awesome, man. There's so much packed into that, right?
It is.
It's pretty healthy when you hear all that, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to go into some of that? What comes to mind when you read that?
It's to me?
Yeah, Jerry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a few things come to mind. It says that this is a spiritual expression. That this group conscience idea is really is a spiritual expression of our group. And despite that, they give us this information about how to come to what a healthy group conscience looks like. And I think, and we can talk about this a little bit later, but there's kind of an art form to an informed group conscience. And I think Steve, and we'll talk about this as well, is we don't want to be in a rush. And I could talk about that a little bit more as well, is that we need to make sure we have the time to really discuss the motion and issues around it and make sure we've planned enough time, excuse me, so that we have the time to do that. And then I'll leave it with this. A big part of the informed group conscience is an understanding of the traditions, right? Because we're talking about the group conscience tonight, but it also relates back to the first tradition of unity. So I'll leave it at that and let Stephen have a go at it.
Yeah.
This thing about the informed group conscience, the way we were both taught was, we talk it to death and then we talk it to death some more and then we give it another 20 minutes and then we vote. That's that kind of came from Don P. And it's really, for me, it has an intensely spiritual angle, and the reason I say that, there's a couple of things about it. One is that it's such an incredible skill. I learned how to listen and how to value what I'm hearing, even though I may not, really agree with it, but to actually, listen anyway. And also, it gives me this ability to kind of have difficult conversations and not just react right away, but to sit with information and ask the important question is, do we have it all in front of us? And that's what's so very important, is that do we really have it all in front of us? And if we don't, go get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of what came to mind with that.
Nice. Yeah. I'll tell you, I love the whole this informed group conscious period, because I was in one of my home groups years ago. I learned a lot of valuable I had a lot of valuable experiences through this whole situation. But as a group, we would barely discuss something, and we would kind of look over at one single person or a couple people that we thought knew everything, and then we would kind of go off that, right? But we would never bring anything to the table. It also taught me a lot about how important certain roles are in the group, especially particularly the secretary, right? Like, how well are her notes? Also. Is the group chair, does the group chair know enough about what an informed group conscious is? Does the secretary know? Are they just jotting down stuff that's kind of like, we talk about a couple little things and they kind of write down the information, or are we kind of being particular with it? Like, for example, there was a situation that a group that I was involved in years ago where we didn't agree with everything that was going on. How you figure, right? And the group was pretty split. Like, half of us wanted a certain thing, and the other half of us didn't want something that happened. And when we went back to look at the notes and the minutes from what the group conscious was, it was kind of like halfway jotted down. Well, we decided to do this and this and this, but no particulars whatsoever. And so we were kind of left with like what we thought we were talking about, right? So. It really shows how important. Does that make sense to y'all? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it really shows how important like particulars are. And also, how do you get a particular if you don't have enough information presented? Like, for example, like where did this with this particular topic I was talking about was how Alcoholics Anonymous, we had voted on the new preamble, right? And half the group wanted to use the new preamble, half of us didn't, right? So it's like, what they said was, they were like, okay, if we ever find it in the book, like it's changed, then we'll reapproach it. And we're like, what book are we talking about? What are that was the notes that was put in this, that was the notes that was put in the secretary notes. So when we got back to it, and none of us had enough context, and none of us really knew enough about any of this stuff to actually understand what I'm talking about, right? And but it just shows how important it is. Like, so what we did was I found out about an informed group conscious, what it was, and then I brought like the facts about how we originally got the original, and group or the preamble, and then also brought the facts on like it was several years ago when they voted on the new one, and how the whole thing went down, and then if you have all the information, plus I like what y'all were talking about. Well, it takes time, because it takes time for a consciousness to show up, right? I like how I was talking about the spiritual expression of the group, right? And Don P. Speaking of Don P. Judy shared this story. I love this story. But she shared that Don, when he first got into his relationship with his wife, when he first got married, right? He had kids on his side of the family. She had kids on her side of the family, right? And there was a lot of noise that would be all night long. A lot of noise. So they got together as a group and was like, all right, look, what do we need to do about this? Let's come up with let's unify and come together and find out what we need to do. And he said the youngest person in the group or in the family said the best thing. And here's what he said. He said, and he's only like 5 or 6 years old, right? He said, whoever it is that's causing all the havoc, making noise at night, I think you should get on top of the refrigerator and jump off head first. Right? Okay. And I know, like, at first you're sitting there thinking, what? But the reason he shared that story was because he said that at least the kid, had the courage and felt comfortable enough to share exactly how he felt, right? Which is huge. And that's what we're talking about, like with the minority and, it doesn't matter how long you've been sober or any of that. Do you feel comfortable enough in your group? What kind of unity does the group have to feel like you can share what you want to share, right? But go ahead. Yeah, Jerry?
Yeah, really some great points there. And as it applies to our group conscience, I had the blessing of being in some really healthy home groups where I was able to be alternate GSR and then GSR. And I've experienced this. I think a group conscience comes around when everybody looks at each other and says, we don't even have to vote on this. Mm. But it is a product of a couple of things. And what Stephen, the points he was hitting about, it takes time. And we're never in a rush in AA. And also, the skilled facilitator there, be it the GSR chairperson or whatever, to be able to make sure everyone has the opportunity to share, even, asking the shy newcomer, because out of the newcomer's mouth comes wisdom often. But unless we ask that newcomer to ask them, hey, what do you think? Because I might think, I've been around a little bit, I might think I have a great idea, which is dangerous in its own self. Yeah. But, it's that, that humility, I have to bring humility to the group conscience. And I have to listen for that and listen to, what the group is saying. Like I say, that's why it's just so important to make sure everybody at the table has a chance to speak.
Nice.
Yeah, and if I could throw something in, I've come to believe that the discussion itself and the fact that we're having a discussion is more a real informed group conscience is more important than what we actually decide. Nice. And I think it's wonderful when every now and then we make a decision and realize, no, that wasn't so great. Let's correct that later, and realize that we're sturdy. We don't have to worry about making a mistake. And as long as everybody is heard, then I think it's really about love and ownership. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're really trying to get across, is that if I'm being heard, I've got some ownership. I belong. And if I'm chipping in, I've got some ownership. And I think that's just really fundamental to being a member. And I've worked with a lot of folks that have been in and out for years that they were just never really had that sense of ownership, and it's new information for them. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I just think that's such a huge thing that we have some ownership in all this. And I think it's so much more important to have the discussion than to get my way, that we get the right kind of process going than a particular result, because I think the results will follow if the process is good. And I wanted to throw in one thing I got from Don P. way back when that I really believe, is we've had some really controversial stuff to wade through. And he said that the only real wrong move for us is to not talk about what we need to talk about. Mm. And so establishing a group conscience is so important, because we're going to get some tough stuff is going to come along. And we're going to need really, dedicated members to sort this stuff out. Nice. Okay, soapbox is over. Thanks.
No, that's awesome. That's good. And something that Jerry had just read right there in the group pamphlet, the term substantial unanimity, right? And so my last sponsor, God rest his soul, Larry, when I first started going through a lot of this, the tradition stuff, Larry was big on substantial unanimity. He was always talking about, you don't want your group to be split, Paul. You don't want your group to be split, and a lot of times, for the listeners, substantial unanimity means a 2/3 vote. Right, it's like you don't necessarily want your group. I love what y'all are talking about. How, like, if it comes to a point where it's if for lack of a better term, proper informed group conscience is achieved, you don't even almost have to. You don't even need to vote technically, but there's still going to be situations where you're voting, and so 2/3 of a group is definitely less. It's not split down the middle, right? So. Substantial unanimity is pretty big. And also, I think it's in the 12 and 12, or it may be in Language of the Heart, but they talk about how, like, what happens is you got, like, someone is in a town, there isn't a group. They decide they're going to form a group, and so they start getting stuff together. They get a few people that are together to form a group, and then, so you have to have some kind of, like, say, like, if you're the only one, or it's you and one other person, you have to call some shots right there. But then right here in this part, wherever, you start forming a group, and then you have a business meeting and actually have a group conscious meeting. I'd say, I think a lot of the stories I've heard about the past is that there was a lot of times, and it still happens like this, but there was a lot of old timers or people at the time that was would get kind of salty because their ego was still trying to call shots, right? But at the end of the day, it really frees us. It really frees my ego and kind of frees me from having to call the shots. So it's one of those things where the group conscious frees me up, right? And I like how. It says, "Be prepared to compromise," right? And there's several situations where I'll go into a group, a business meeting, and I have to just remind myself I'm not always right. Let's see what the group says, right? Jerry.
Yeah. Really, really true. And about the substantial unanimity, I think that's an important point. And sometimes we can't come to that. Yeah. And that's what, to Stephen's point, we need to make sure we've got enough time, because sometimes we can't come to a group conscience.
Yeah.
And say, okay, and we need to, we'll set another time, next business meeting, or my home group, when we have motions, area motions and things, we'll set aside like a Saturday morning, just to talk about those motions and come to a group conscience, if possible, on those motions. So it really, and this is a world that says hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, and that just doesn't work very well. Alcoholics Anonymous has been my experience.
Yeah.
And then if Stephen wants to say something about that as well, and then I'd like to talk about the minority opinion a little bit too down the road.
Okay.
Yeah, all I wanted to throw in, Paul, I totally agree with you. The business about it really does free me up, where I may think I've got a great idea, and it's like, but I know that the group is going to weigh in, and that we're going to get a more balanced look at it. And I really love when I'm thinking of it that way. Then something more well-rounded always seems to come into it. And sometimes, like in a discussion, I'll share something, and then the sharing continues after I've finished, and somebody will add something, and I'll think, oh gosh, I wish I'd have thought of that. Yeah. Or I'm glad they threw that in. The whole subject needed a little something extra. Yeah. And it becomes bigger than business. It's more, hey, did we get a really good discussion going here? And it can be the meeting, it can be the business. I mean, the spirituality of this never ends, and it's so much bigger than me. And anyhow, that's kind of my thought on it. It's just so much bigger than me, and I've come to relax with that, which is really a nice thing.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And let me touch on that too. So also, one of the great things that comes from just discussing stuff, is, and also kind of leads into what Jerry was saying he wanted to talk about with the minority. What it does is when you discuss stuff and you're asking other people, like, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? And then, like, even if they say something that, say they're new and they don't know much about traditions, right? Just conversating about it and bringing it to the awareness of the group and having a group conversation about it can teach everyone so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jerry.
Yeah, and it really, I just going to say a little bit about what Stephen was talking about as well. That this idea of a spiritual entity, in that, because in the second tradition it says a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. It doesn't say Jerry as he might express himself in group conscience. And so it really is, I have to have that proper mindset. I pray before our home group business meetings to get myself out of the way. So that this thing might work. And it's that those principles before personalities for me is something I hold myself in check with.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and I'm a real believer in praying before doing much of anything anymore, whether that's a service commitment or sharing at a meeting or meeting with a sponsee or a difficult conversation. In a way, it's all the same. I really want God to speak through me and help me get the heck out the way. So I don't see where this principle begins or ends. I'm just better when I remember it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. It brings me to a point. Here in Tennessee, Area 64, we had our Area 64 convention. Maybe 2023. I don't think it was 24. I think it was 2023, I believe. We had a guy come, Kevin H., past delegate from Area 1, which is, well, I don't know if he's not Area 1, but he's
Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama. Yeah. And he did a home group workshop. For the listeners, I highly encourage you. He freaking killed this thing. Kevin H. did a home group workshop. You can go to the Three Legacies Recovery Recordings YouTube page and search Kevin H. Home group workshop. But he talks on there on how his group, they do something what's called prayerful consideration. And they try, it's not always necessary for every vote, but they try to, like anything that the group comes, decides they want to discuss, they pray about it until the following meeting. So that way, his point is like, if God's supposed to, show up in this group conscious, a loving God, like you got to give that some time, some space, right? And so I love the idea of this prayerful consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. You wanted to speak, Jerry, on the minority vote or the minority voice?
Yeah. And if I could, I just wanted, Stephen and I were talking about this earlier about the first time the group, when Bill first really realized the group conscience, the power of the group conscience was when Charlie Towns offered him a job at Towns Hospital, and that he could be like a paraprofessional counselor, and they'd have all these things there for him, but he'd be a professional. And of course, Bill at the time was, he and Lois didn't have a lot of money. She was working at the department store. And so Bill took some time with it. And on the ride home, he had convinced himself that, I think there's some phrase about the workers due his pay or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And he was convinced that, okay, this is the right thing to do. And then when he came back to his home and there were some alcoholics there, I think they were going to have a meeting that night. And Bill goes on to explain this to everybody. And he was a little, he couldn't understand why people weren't as enthusiastic about it as he was. And so the group said, "Hey, Bill, we know you're having a hard time financially. It bothers us. We've thought about it, but if you turn this thing into professional situation, it's not good. We just can't. It's not going to be good." So the wisdom of the group conscience, and early on, and if you think about what the average sobriety was back then, it wasn't much, but the wisdom of the group conscience came to be. And I think, Stephen, did you mention something about, like, if sobriety was the only qualification, that could be a problem?
Yeah, that was the principle that we're going to get into this quite a bit in the eighth tradition about non-professionalism. But we start to see it here. What didn't just jump off the page and what comes on reflection, and something Sam beat into us, is that if your sobriety is your only qualification, you're just not qualified. What we have here is not for sale. And that, it really would have done a terrible damage if Bill would have tried to monetize his sobriety. I think it comes down to love and service can never be for sale. Our 12-step work can never be paid for. And anyway, but what we'll get into in the eighth tradition is, look, if you've got the same training or education or experience as a non-alcoholic, then you can take whatever job you want, But for Bill, this would have been a terrible, terrible thing. And I just really applaud their courage, that they stood up and said, Bill, we love you. We're going to try and figure this out, but you can't do this thing to us. And of course, Bill would go on, he and Lois would go on to lose their house. It cost him something, but he listened to the group conscience, and thank God he obeyed. I mean, I know we say these things as if they were kind of, trite, but they weren't. This was very real to Bill. I mean, being a provider and being a success story, this was such a big thing for him. But the group conscience came first, and if that's not God, I don't know what is.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It made me think of I don't know, it was about a year or so ago, year and a half ago, my home group. We were, my home group's only a little over a couple of years old, and we were just working out things that we wanted to do, and so our format is, you read a couple pages out of the big book, first 164 pages, and share on it for 15 to 20 minutes, and we had several people show up and say, well, can they read something other? And at the time, I had like this new love for pamphlets. I'd found a couple years previous, and I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, man, I want to let's discuss. It was very little discussion first off, like, for me. I'm sitting there. I got this idea where I was like, man, let's start being able to add pamphlets and this and this and this, and so we all, I'll throw that out there and like make a motion, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And then the group kind of discussed it. I had a couple of people talk about, I like this idea. And they explained why they thought, they explained why. And then, like, we all discussed it as a group, right? And then, the very end, one of the guys that spoke up that had been sober longer than everyone else pretty much. And he was like, one of the things I value about our group is that we're a big book group, right? And, we stick to the literature, the first 164. We're just a big book group. And it was funny because, like, whenever he had mentioned this, right, like, every one of us, like, me anyways, like, and pretty much all of us had realized, like, whoa, holy crap, like, we were fixing to sit here and turn something that when he said that, every one of us realized, like, this is what we love about the group. You know what I mean? Like, we love this part of the group. But it was cool because we all discussed and shared our opinions and discussed and shared our opinions, discussed and shared our opinion. When he said that, it was like right then it just moved everybody's heart. It was like, wow, how important is that?
That's a cool story. Yeah.
Yeah. How important is that? And it's funny because I joked around and was like, I don't think my wife was at that meeting, and I told her, I was like, yeah, I was almost the cause of the end of the the cause of the end of the home group.
It was right there.
Yeah, it's right there, dude, right there. I had made a motion. I had made a motion and everything, right? Yeah. And it's cool because, like, we're all, like, there was a huge number, I'd say the majority of the group was there at that meeting, and it was an experience all of us had where we're like, wow, that is why we love this group. It's like, that's one of the main reasons, right? It's healthy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of leads into the minority opinion, if you will.
Okay, sure.
With that group member bringing up kind of a different angle on the thing, and brought your group right back to what you're saying, what you loved about the group. And the minority opinion is an important part of an informed group conscience. Often things will come to a vote, and there may be some nays, and it's after the vote is taken, it's important to ask for what they call a minority opinion. The minority opinion is not a rehash of something. It's already been kind of hashed out talking about it. But if someone has new information to bring forth that may be considered, the chairperson would ask, has this new information potentially changed the way you'd vote? And if that's the case, the group will ask to vote again. And the most powerful example I've ever seen, well, not of ever, but a powerful example that I was a part of is I was DCM and at an area assembly. And there was a motion that had more than substantial unanimity. and our district voted against it. And so I asked for the minority hearing to be minority opinion to be heard, and it did. And the chairperson asked if this has changed anybody the way they would vote, and enough hands went up that they asked for a revote. In the whole room, not that we were right, but it was amazing to see the whole room flip their vote.
Wow.
Based on being an informed group conscience. And to me, it was like, it wasn't like, oh, gee, we're right, but it really hit me really about the spiritual entity
Nice.
of a group conscience. The very part I was there, kind of blew my hair back in some respects, like, wow, this thing really works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you think about it, the way the tradition reads is that we're not governed by an individual. If anything, we're governed by a group conscience.
Nice.
And having this wonderful tool for catching us at the last minute before we just ride the wave and saying, "Hey, have we really thought about everything?" Anyway, that if we're not going to be governed, how are we going to make decisions? And well, we're going to make decisions on principle, and the most important way to get there is to listen to everybody. Give everybody their chance. Anyway, just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, like that. I'm reading one of these takes right here. I'm on AA.org, and it says the key to unity, or the key to AA unity, is working with others and not against them. And so, which is what we're really talking about, right? Like what Jerry mentioned earlier. Like, what are we aiming towards? To kind of piggyback off what you just talked about, Steve. Like, if unity is what I'm aiming towards, the decisions I make and how I approach it is completely different, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
And is there ever, is there ever a bad day to say maybe the world's bigger than me being right just this one time?
Yeah, because I used to really like being right, getting my way.
Yeah. Well, I remember, Jerry, you saying something to me once in passing about, I think I'm going to take a pass on being right just this once.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, just this once. But anyhow.
And I think the experience too that Stephen's talking about as well, it's a little easier. I've been sober for a little bit, and to see it work gives me great kind of confidence in the spiritual nature of the home group and the group conscience, because I've seen it work. So therefore, I don't have to get quite so worked up as I used to be about things, because I've seen it work.
Yeah.
And I've certainly seen the group conscience come to a much better decision, much better action than I had in mind. Yeah. And that's where, really see this work and go, oh, wow, there's more to this than just me. And maybe a higher powers here in some respects. It's powerful to watch, really.
Yeah, I love that. It goes to that, and as Bill sees it, Bill has that line: "Nothing's lost in God's economy." It's like, first off, something that may be working, that may work for the group right now, we may discover as a group and learn a lot of valuable lessons through. Like, oh man, we should probably back off from this and do this, right? And so just like, it goes back to what Don was saying with, like, it's just how important it is to discuss, right? And let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. That there was, me and Steve have been in several group conscious meetings where, it's like, hey, look, like, how do we feel as a group about this situation? How do we want to approach this? How do we want to, like, even if we don't do anything, take any action, still as a group, it's important that we discuss to where we all kind of have, like, we have an idea on what we're really trying to aim towards at a group. And Larry, my last sponsor, used to always talk about how, how vital it is. Like, let's just say, for example, the safety of an individual in your group, right? So let's say there's someone coming into the group and they're, causing havoc, say preying on women or whatever the situation is, or someone, just certain situation. It could be someone that comes in out of control, drunk or whatever, right? as a group, when these things happen, how do we want to discuss this how do we want to approach this situation, right? And it's important that we understand as a group, like, let's just say, for example, like, okay, what we're going to do if someone's disrupting the meeting is I'm just throwing this out there, where we want the chairperson has the right and to bring up, hey, look, if you're going to be disruptive, yada, 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 we ask that maybe grab a couple guys and take them outside. But let's just say that's how we want to approach the situation, right? And it's in that situation, the chairperson or whoever it is that's in that home group needs to know, as a group, this is what we've decided. This is the appropriate way we want to handle this situation. Yada yada yada. Right? So we're all on the same page and we have some kind of game plan when stuff comes up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, that we've been talking about that in our home group recently. We have group guidelines, and we look at them every now and again. And it's funny how group guidelines evolve, but it's the same thing in that it's important to keep a healthy home group, that the chairperson is supported and kind of keeping order in the meeting. And then with the idea of being useful and helpful to the person, we may take a couple of folks, ask them to go outside. We talk to him out there, give him a little meeting on his own, and maybe we can help that person get pointed in the right direction. You know?
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and that would make sense in the case of someone who's just not sober enough for a bigger meeting.
Yeah.
There's no problem with giving him a smaller meeting. A lot of times that's really the rightest answer. If you've got somebody who's just having all kinds of problems, or he can't sit still, or something like that, if he's just scaring people, give him a smaller meeting, get some larger guys to just kind of hang out there and help us out with it. But things like that are very practical. We don't want the chairperson to be isolated and feel like he's got to figure this out on his own.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a group conscience, you really have nowhere to go with your problems. And I think that's really where you have these kind of really tough scenarios in like your clubhouse meetings and such, where they don't really have a group. And so, it's just really yucky. How do you deal with problems if you don't have a group conscience?
Yeah.
There are reasons why, I guess is what I'm saying, that we do all this stuff.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Such great points that we've been discussing. I love that. Jerry, you got anything else you want to add? We're about 48 minutes in.
No, I just, I appreciate being with both of you, and hopefully I've done the topic some justice here. And always appreciate being asked and hanging out with a dear friend of mine, Stephen.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve.
I'm sorry, did I miss something there, Paul?
No. Do you have anything else you want to add to the before we close it out?
All I really want to say is I think it's just part of belonging, to participate and to be heard. And, I've been outvoted a number of times recently, and none of them were a big deal. And I was just so happy to be a part of a healthy discussion. And I want so much to leave AA better than I found it. And an informed group conscience, I think, makes a lot of that possible. And so anyway, I echo what Jerry said. It was really a privilege to be with some friends talking about something I love.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Absolutely. Well, for the listeners, we are meeting again to continue with this series. We're going to be doing Tradition 3 on Sunday, October 12th. So we got October coming up, guys. It's almost fall, or it's about, I guess it probably already is fall, but I'm excited about October. Lots of cool stuff, like I'd mentioned earlier. This Tuesday, Don L. from Bellingham, Washington, we're doing an episode on Our Real Purpose. Then we got next Sunday, 1 week from the day, Kat V. from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We're doing an episode calling it We Had to Stop Doubting the Power of God. And I'll hear from everyone later on this week. Appreciate you guys.
I got you.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Have a wonderful night.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yes, sir. See you guys.
All right.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.